We'll start now. This is the Salina Planning Commission, and we'll begin our meeting today with approval of our minutes from our last meeting.
So moved.
Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes. All those in favor vote aye, please. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We have one public hearing item today, a legislative matter, number 3.1, application Z19-5A, filed by the Salina City Planning Commission, requesting amendment of sections 42503 and 42504 of the sign regulations to clarify what types of signs are and are not allowed to be located in the public right-of-way, and amendment Article 14 of the Salina zoning ordinance, definitions, by adding a definition for government sign. This item is continued from June 18th.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was 95% sure that we would have something for you to look at and make recommendations on today, but our legal counsel indicated they were not ready to sign off on that yet, so the hearing is scheduled nonetheless. And so, John, if you could, not the first draft text amendment, but sections 504 and 505, if you could get those on the screen. These are in your packet. And we just wanted to kind of walk through so that the commission understood, and we're still working on these classifications, which one it should fall under. But 504, the list of items that you have there is just completely exempt from the sign code, meaning essentially exempt from any regulation. So if you have a flag on your business or property or at your home, and you fly an American flag in your yard, or an institution has a flag that they're flying out front on private property, there's no need for a permit, and there's no regulation of that. There's regulation of the structure. It has to be sturdy, and it has to not exceed a certain height, but not, we're not going to tell you how big the flag is or any of those types of things. The second exception is things that you see every day, like no parking signs, speed limit signs, crosswalk signs, railroad crossing signs. Those types of things are in the right-of-way, and they're exempt from any kind of sign regulation. The city obviously has to meet certain safety standards, but our planning division does not review the location or design or size of railroad crossing signs. Third category is memorial signs or tablets. That could be in a cemetery, but there could be a individual property that may want to have some sort of memorial or marker out in their front yard. You don't need a sign permit for that. It's not subject to regulation. We require by code that a new business opens or a building is built, you have to have address numbers on the front. So we have a city code that for fire protection, emergency service response, that sets the size of the numbers, but at your home or at your business you should have address numerals posted on the front, but you don't need to get a permit. It's not subject to any regulation. If you are a bank or a school or that has multiple entrances, and you want to put a sign out at the near the curb directing people, say do not enter, one way, this is a freight entrance, that type of thing, and it's less than 5 square feet in size, you don't need a permit. It's not subject to regulation. Non-commercial opinion signs and political signs in your front yard, if it's 8 square feet or less, is not subject to regulation. And scoreboards inside an athletic stadium is not subject to regulation. So if at Dean Evans Stadium they put up a McDonald's or a Coca-Cola advertisement on their scoreboard, that's not a sign. It's not subject to any kind of regulation. They don't need a permit. And then we still don't know if this is going to come back or not, but historically there was an agreement between Salina Downtown Inc. and the City Commission that city crews would help display banners on the covered crosswalks in the downtown area. Those were in the right-of-way and would change out periodically. With the different ways of communicating now, having those banner signs may not be necessary or desirable. So we will look at that. And then if you put window signs in your windows offering a product or service or indicating some 20% off, and you don't cover more than 33% of your total window, that is not considered a sign. It's essentially exempt from regulation. The other category there are signs that are allowed, and you can put them up without a permit. And it may turn out that we would just blend all these together and essentially make all these exempt from a sign permit, as opposed to being totally exempt from any regulation. But nameplate signs, we don't see them. There's still a few around. There was one, I can recall it, Cloud and Roach and Central High used to have one, the old style bulletin board signs where they would put out on the bulletin board when services were at a certain time. The one at Cloud and Roach has been replaced by electronic changeable copy signs, so they don't need the old style letters on a bulletin board. So we may want to take a look at that. And then if you're on a property that's a pumpkin patch or a corn field or something, and you are selling produce on the property, then you can have signs there without having to get a sign permit. So we're going to take a look at each of those. But what I wanted to do, John, if you could go to the draft text amendment, and then we'll go to the photos. But what we're trying to capture here and make sure the commission understands, and you can tell us if you think they're desirable or not desirable, but if you go to the City of Salina's website, one of the things that you have on the home page there is reminding people not to put out garage sales or Pepsi-Cola on sale or banners or real estate for sale signs in the public right-of-way. And so, as a general rule, signs are not permitted to be located in the right-of-way, but there may be some signs that we do want to allow for. The first one is fairly obvious. That's our traffic control regulatory signs. So that is one exception. We have some photo examples of this, but we've had interest expressed from North Salina Community Development, from Kansas Wesleyan, about attaching colorful vertical banners to light and utility poles in the right-of-way. There's a number of communities throughout the country. I'm sure you may have traveled in some where you go down an entryway into the community and they have colorful flags or banners hanging from their power poles. The third one is, as you recall, this commission recommended approval and the City Commission approved a amendment that allowed for, it doesn't have to be feather flags, but we have an authorization to put up feather flags as a temporary sign for periods 4 times a year, but you cannot place a feather flag in the right-of-way. Well, we have different events downtown. We have First Friday. We have different businesses who are interested in seeing if we can have a flag program. If you've walked, they've probably all been replaced with the new sidewalks, but the old sidewalks, a number of them had holes out by the curb where you could put flag poles in and have flags, and I have consistently told them that you can't put a flag out in the right-of-way because that is prohibited, and in the downtown area that's the only place it could be. So that's another exception that we wanted to discuss with you. Bus stop and bus shelter signs, I think you're familiar with a sign like the sign at the Stiefel Theater or the old Vogue Theater, or some others we have downtown. If you walk down Santa Fe sidewalk, you'll see at different points businesses that have signs like the Vernon's Jeweler sign that project out over the public right-of-way, the sidewalk. Those are already legal. And movable A-frame signs are legal, but they're addressed in another section of the code. And then there may be occasional things where there's a community event, or some that I have worked with where we work with a group that wants to put out wayfinding signs, whether it's at Midway Drive to direct people to the Tony's Pizza Event Center, or whether it's the River Festival or Farm Show or things like that. That might be another exception to placement of signs in the right-of-way for wayfinding or directional purposes. So John, if you want to go through the photographs in order, we'll just kind of talk about those.
Thanks.
So this is an example that is this Claflin John, or is this this looks like Cloud Street? So on Cloud Street, Kansas Wesleyan worked with Westar, because those poles belong to Westar, to get a pole attachment agreement to place those there. North Salina Community Development is working with Westar on North 9th Street to do something similar. We would probably have guidelines that would say they couldn't be used for advertising or promoting certain products, but they could say welcome to Salina or other types of things, or they could have seasonal things. Does everybody believe that that is tasteful and attractive, that that would be something we'd want to allow for? It's not, we don't have a provision for allowing it or disallowing it. We're kind of silent on that, but Westar is particular about how things are attached. We want to make sure they're not too large and that they're above the street, that they're maintained, those type of things. So if we went that direction, we would have some guidelines that we would review with you as a commission. But essentially, if the city sponsors a banner program, it's considered to be government speech, and if it's government speech, then the government can regulate its content when it's speaking. So we can have more say over how it looks or what can and can't be on it if it's government speech. The next one I think is a bus stop. Or no, this is what we would call a wayfinding or directional sign. So by code, that's considered to be a temporary sign. By code, temporary signs can't be in the right-of-way, but it seems to make sense to make allowances for that. Again, if it's a community event and not something that's individual to a business or property, then that was something that we would discuss as an exception to signs in the right-of-way. I think we have, is that the other view, John? Yeah. Okay. So we have an agreement with OCCK as it relates to, if you've looked now, I think we have 5 bike share stations that are around the community. I think there's one at Kansas Wesleyan, there's one at Bill Burke Park, I think there's one at Sunset Plaza. Some of those are in the right-of-way, and we have a provision that allows for signs to be placed on those bike station docks, but we don't have a formal provision that allows for this. So if the commission thinks it is desirable to have signage at bus stops, or if there's a shelter, a bus stop shelter, then that would be an exception that we would want to include. If you don't think those are appropriate, then that would be something that we would not include as an exception. and whatever. Our other ones are all just garage sales. So I said these would be considered ones that would be candidates that people have been put on notice that they can be picked up and removed if they're out in the right-of-way. You can have, if you live in a neighborhood and you're acquainted with somebody who lives on a corner lot near the entrance to the neighborhood, you can get their permission and put your sign in their yard, just not in the right-of-way. And so these are examples. I don't.
You know, right there, is the right-of-way all the way to the sidewalk from
The right-of-way is
Ohio?
actually even to the other side of the sidewalk, so the right-of-way is way over here. I believe that there are some even businesses that front along there that are not aware that that frontage road is a public street. If you've noticed recently, if you've been in that area, you see it's been completely resurfaced by city crews because it is considered to be a public street. So I'm not sure that there's a wide awareness there. There was, we used to have at the corner of Cloud and Ohio, there was a barricade there, and Hannah Grain purchased that corner property, and we worked with them to remove that barricade, and now they have some signage and things up there because they're using the vacated frontage road for their parking for their business. But yes, I have, and it's unfortunate they don't really have a yard, but there was a shop that was in there, and they had a banner on stakes out in this area, and I stopped and I picked it up and carried it into the store and told them they couldn't have it out there, and they said, well, we really don't have a front yard to put it in. And I said, that's correct, you really don't have a, they have the parking area that's between this frontage road and the building, but obviously that's not very visible from Ohio. But this entire strip right here is all city-owned right-of-way.
On the bus stop signage, it's in the right-of-way and it's advertising. I suppose this benefits OCCK. Is that advertising?
I believe that's the case. In discussing this with the city attorney, he thinks that we need a better, more formalized agreement in place. Many, it's not uncommon. Obviously, if you've traveled in large cities, there are advertisements on subways, trains, buses. Mm-hmm. Those are, again, they fall into the category of government speech, where the government or the transit authority has a set of guidelines and says, you know, we won't advertise alcohol products, or we won't advertise cigarettes, or we won't advertise vaping products, or whatever. We don't have anything like that in place with OCCK. So if that was something that you thought, it may end up that certain types of advertising wouldn't be allowed, but I'm imagining that these particular advertising signs, there is some monetary compensation to OCCK to having them there. We just don't have a formal arrangement with them that tells us. We basically have an arrangement where we turn this space over to them, and they kind of manage it. If they get sponsorship for a shelter or for a bench, I think that's the way they're doing it. So it needs to be addressed in any event.
Yeah, I certainly understand that, and I don't want to limit OCCK's partnerships and their funding ability, but it's advertising in the right-of-way for businesses, and why wouldn't anyone else be able to do it? And also, I really think there needs to be some kind of, I don't know, aesthetic standard or something. That isn't something that and it's not because it's a competitor of mine. It's just,
well, it's the same thing that we have seen with what we've described in our. If you have a banner program, generally you have some program guidelines that say the banners have to be made out of a sturdy material. They can't exceed so many feet and square feet in size. They have to be set so many feet above the sidewalk, those types of things. The same thing with decorative flags downtown, and then the same thing with these types of, the ones I've seen, it's like if you have a bus stop shelter, the signs can't cover more than X% of the walls of the shelter. In other words, you can't have the entire shelter be 14 signs or something like that. And then aesthetic standards, size limits for the signs, that type of thing. Something we don't have in place now, but in talking with the city's legal counsel, it's a place we would like to get to if these are going to be allowed. But you are correct. The concern, the most important concern for commissioners and for staff is that any time we're dealing with signage, we're dealing with communication and First Amendment, and we have to be very cognizant that we have a level playing field for everyone. And the point we tried to make is that if another real estate firm placed a sign out here indicating that this property here was for sale, we would say, you can't have that sign there because it's in the right-of-way, move it back. And they're going to point right over here and say, well, what about that sign? And that makes staff very uncomfortable.
I would agree with that. Again, I understand the purpose of it, but if it's not allowed for others, it would be great to see that kind of signage be more community-oriented than private business-oriented.
It could be that it's limited to whether it's community agencies or social service agencies or promotion of community events or organizations or things like that, as opposed to pure advertising. And
I
that's
think that'd be an excellent idea.
I would be willing to guess that if it wasn't for that advertising, that shelter wouldn't be there at all.
it isn't.
It's actually not the case, because I've looked at sponsoring those signs, and that's not the case. Someone else paid for that shelter, but the signage cost is relatively small.
Yeah, I don't think the cost of having the advertising there would pay for the whole cost of OCCK is putting the pads in. They're acquiring the equipment or the benches or shelters there. They're getting it donated, and that's why there was discussed at the city commission that there's numerous city-go stops around town that have no bench and no shelter, and there's some that do, and it's most of the ones that are there are donated or sponsored, or Doug Remp doesn't own the McDonald's on Crawford, Ohio anymore, but when he did, I think he helped contribute to the cost of a stop that's there on Faith Drive next to McDonald's. And so there's not a 100% correlation between these signs and the fact that those are there at all.
And on this stop in particular, that's not the case. But I do think it would be great if it would be social organizations and helping organizations that have the opportunity to spawn or to put their advertising on things like that, rather than private businesses.
And not for profit.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I'm also concerned, though, and I've seen this in another community where, of course, there were wooden benches and subject to more wear and tear, but 3-4 years down the road, they're starting to look real sloppy, and it's an eyesore, and there should be some provision that whatever sign is there, that there has to be some standard.
What we did with the bicycle docking stations, the Zagster stations, is we did what we call a master license agreement between the City of Salina and OCCK, who'd secured the funding for those. Zagster is the one that actually rents the bikes and gets the revenue from them, but OCCK was kind of the sponsoring entity to get that started. So we have a master license agreement that addresses where they can be, addresses that they have to be maintained, addresses that bicycles that are misplaced and not returned to the docking station are the responsibility of Zagster. That if a bicycle falls into disrepair and is not usable, they're responsible to maintain it. And if the whole station falls into disrepair, that it either needs to be fixed up or the city can simply remove it. We have that for the bike docking station. We don't have that with OCCK for all the bus stops. That might be a step in that direction to have that to address not just this, but other more global issues, because OCCK and CityGo is city supported, but it is not a city agency. It's not a city department, and so it receives financial assistance from the city, but it's not a city transit company. But those were the major exceptions that we're working toward. And if you wanted to go back to that, John, the draft text amendment, just so these were the main categories that we were talking about: the traffic signs, the vertical banners, the decorative flags, projecting signs, the sandwich board signs, the example I gave before, but I think it was the 100th year of a Boy Scout chapter in Salina, but to commemorate that, there is a carved rock sign that commemorates that. It's in the public right-of-way out on Magnolia, across from Casey's and in front of Dillon's, and that was placed in the public right-of-way through a license agreement approved by the City Commission. We did that, but we didn't have a provision in the code that really authorized or supported that, so we have added that there. But are any of these that you see here anything that you would just want to rule out of hand, or are you comfortable with us working through each of these and providing you with examples of guidelines for how each of those have been addressed in other communities?
I would say we're agreeable.
The wayfaring signs, what number is that?
It's down there at the bottom, last item, wayfinding. So we have permanent wayfinding signs, that we have a wayfinding program. Those are permanent signs in the right-of-way, and if you would feel better, it could say temporary wayfinding and directional signs. It's really geared more towards that, and it's really the first exception. That's the traffic control signs and all of that. The wayfinding signs that we have in the right-of-way would be fall into that category, because they are required to meet the Uniform Code for traffic control devices.
Well, I'm thinking of is, like lead sled, I believe is for profit.
Mm-hmm.
And so there shouldn't be any wayfaring signs for that. Is that correct? And then like where there was fishing with a cop, that's a city function, and there could be wayfaring signs for them in the right-of-way?
Well, the way this is worded is on that last exception, the governing body could make individual determinations about, there is not an official sponsorship, but there is quite a bit of city contribution, in-kind contribution, city staff contribution to support of the lead sled event. And it could be that if the governing body viewed the lead sled event as a community event of significance for the community, that they could authorize that to be included, just as it is for the River Festival or Farm Show. Or
I didn't mean to single them out. I
right,
just was using
that
that
as an example. But that, one of the reasons that the city supports that in kind and with other contributions is that it is viewed as an event that does attract others to the community and promotes the visitation and all to the community. So that would weigh into something like that. Somebody having an open house. I actually worked, and I can't remember which version it was, but there was a Friends of the River open house that was at the Art Center warehouse on 4th Street, and I worked with Friends of the River group to put out some wayfinding signs to direct the public to that open house on the river project. That was deemed to be something of a community-wide event or something of community interest. So the idea is there is to give the governing body some leeway to decide if it's an event, a community event. Again, the idea behind all this is that when it's the government speaking, the government can regulate content, what it says or doesn't say. When it's not the government speaking, it's harder to do that. But if it's government speech and the government doesn't want to advertise tobacco or alcohol products, they can make that decision.
Okay. And so why does it have to go to the city commission? Why can't it go to you or maybe the planning commission?
It could. The idea is that that somebody makes a determination that it's an event, a community event that justifies putting those types of signs out to direct. So it doesn't have to be the governing body, and I think the authorization is going to be delegated to staff because staff's the one that puts those out. But outside of if you didn't do it this way or some way similar, then you'd have to write an ordinance where you'd have to identify all the events you were going to allow it for and put them in the ordinance. And I don't think we want to do that. We want to have some flexibility and be able to respond to things. There might be some big event for the 2020 census. There might be other things that the city commission says we want to make sure that people can find their way there. So hopefully so if you want to go to the number 3 slide there, John, the River Festival sign, or the number 4. So what you see above, this is the city has a wayfinding program. These are considered traffic control type signs. Those are permanent signs in the right-of-way that are part of a wayfinding program. These are temporary signs that are put out when there's a specific event. So that last exception is designed to allow for these. But it would not allow for somebody to put a sign right there directing you to their garage sale. It would be for community events or that type of thing. And the primary thing is to try to give the city commission some discretion to decide when these types of things rise to the level where there should be wayfinding or directional signs allowed. And to the best of my knowledge, it's River Festival, it's the farm show, and perhaps, I don't know if they've been put out for lead sled or not, but. But in terms of action, we would not have a planning commission meeting at all on August 2nd. So if the chair wished to close off any further comment or questions, then we would entertain a motion to continue this application to your August 16th meeting to allow staff and the city's legal counsel to make major revisions or additions to the draft that we bring back to you. So
Thank you.
I have one more comment.
Yes.
Or
Commissioner Good.
question. What do you all think about that one right-of-way there on Ohio and Cloud that I asked, how wide was that right-of-way? To make an exception, if they have such a huge right-of-way like that, that they could put a sign, like we could say, is that too complicated? Like at least 10 feet in or something like that?
You got that all up and down 9th Street, too.
that would be pretty complicated because the ones on 9th Street are wider than that. And then the way I look at that is in some ways it's very similar to the median on Belmont Boulevard. And I don't think we would want people putting signs out in the median on Belmont Boulevard. So in some ways, you could view this as an island between this. We have that on Broadway too, where there's, you have Windsor Drive that parallels Broadway south of Sunset Plaza. There's some other situations. This is not the widest right-of-way that we have.
And even though they have pavement up to on their side, they could put it in a stand. They don't have to put it in grass.
Put it in what?
A stand.
Oh,
But it has to be right next to their building.
Well, it can be out the
It
edge
can
of
be out in
the
the
parking
front.
lot. We'd have to show you an aerial photo, but there's 60, 70 feet between the edge of the right-of-way for this frontage road and where the buildings are. It's just that those locations are not out next to Ohio. They're separated by this frontage road.
Right.
But it's been my experience that most of the businesses are there in those locations have wall signs, and most of the people can find them pretty readily by the wall signs that are there.
Okay.
Anything else? If not, do we have a motion to continue this?
to continue?
Are we? We're continuing it, are we not?
Yeah.
Yes.
Continue it to the August 16th. Continue this application to your August 16th meeting.
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to continue item number 3.1 to the August 16th meeting to allow staff and city's legal counsel to make major revisions or additions to the draft amendment based on the input received today. All those in favor vote aye, please. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Administrative items?
As an administrative item, I think, and we may try to target August 16th, but we'll have to decide. We wanted to spend some time providing the Planning Commission with some literature on what's happening around the country and what may be happening here with changes and continued closures of brick and mortar retail facilities, and we're kind of concerned that we may not have seen the last of it in Salina, but we would like to perhaps have a study session where we look at ideas for reusing empty retail businesses, and we may start by focusing on the Kmart building on Broadway, which is currently vacant, and do some brainstorming on adaptive reuse and what has maybe been done in other communities, and if there's things that we need to do zoning wise or land use wise to create more flexible options for what happens with spaces that are not that were formerly big box retail but are probably not going to come back as big box retail. So we would tentatively be trying to set that for your August 16th meeting, just so you're aware of that, and then maybe send out some information to you in advance of that meeting. But it's a topic that staff has been discussing.
Okay. Preliminary discussion items.
We do not have anything other than our legal counsel has completed a master license agreement draft for, again, dealing with the small cell cellular fixtures in the right-of-way, and we've gotten feedback from the representatives of Verizon and some of the other places, so we hope to get that finalized by the 1st of August.
You know, I just looked at my calendar. I think I'm on the right year. I don't think there's an August 16.
Do I have?
Tuesday.
It's not a Tuesday. So,
August
what
20th?
did we just make the motion to? The 19th?
To the 16th.
Okay. So, I think we need to correct I think I got stuck on July in the August when I sent this report out. But we may need to have the maker of the motion and the seconder amend their motion so that we're continuing this to the August 20th.
So amended?
Does the seconder agree?
Second.
Okay. So we have an amended motion, and we're going to continue it to a date that actually is a meeting date. So all those in favor of making it August 20th instead of the 16th, please say aye.
Aye.
And no meeting on the 6th then, right?
There will be no meeting on the 6th, but there will be a meeting on the 20th. And that's what we were looking at, is that second meeting.
And is it the planning department that enforces weeds, you know?
It's the Community and Development Services. We have 2 code enforcement officers. One deals with south of Crawford and one deals with north of Crawford. And they deal with trash, tall weeds and grass, and stagnant water drainage issues. Right now they say that weeds and grass and trash left out in yards and front yards and all is what they're dealing with the most.
Well, I'm not talking about private property, I'm talking about 9th Street. Sometimes I think it's contracted mowed, and sometimes it gets pretty tall.
What sections are you referring to?
Well, like a block south of Magnolia. But there's several different areas. I think it must be different contractors mow at different times. And it doesn't seem to be once a week. And so some of those weeds are pretty unsightly.
It is, it's something our building official who oversees the code enforcement is, it's actually a project he's working on. Now, there was an ordinance change in 2015 where the city turned over a lot of that mowing to abutting property owners. And there's a great reduction in the right-of-ways that the city itself mows or is responsible for. So all of those areas have to be looked at case by case, and that's what the building official's doing right now, so that there's a clear understanding of what we're still mowing and what is the responsibility of the abutting property owner.
Who is responsible for the Broadway and 9th Street corner where the plantings are in front of the convenience store?
Oh, the 5 corners.
Because that needs to be addressed soon.
Okay, the city parks department, I believe, takes care of that,
I
but
think the 5 corners, right, where there's there's a sculpture there. It's been volunteers that.
Okay.
I thought that whole thing was you, the North Side did that.
Right. And I
It's
guess
gotten
with
out
the
of control.
rains- Yeah, I could see with the rains.
The weeds are bigger than the plants.
There's an agreement that deals with that, so I'll confirm that. It's in, there was, again, we refer to license agreement to place private improvements in the public right-of-way, and that's usually done when somebody else is maintaining the improvements. So I know the city had some involvement when it was installed, but if it is maintained by volunteers or North Salina Community Development, then I will see if that is contained in that agreement, and if it spells that out, and what's to be done if it's not. But with the rain this year, there's a lot of weed growth that there's just a lot of thistle and a lot of very aggressive dandelions that have interspersed their way into landscapes, and sometimes you have to look real close to see what that you see a green plant and you see leaves, and then you have to look real close to see that it's a weed and not what's intended to be there. So
Usually by July, the mowing slowed down, but not this year.
Not this year.
So the Planning Commission approved the plans for a police training center out on Yost Drive. There were bids received on that project today, and there were bids awarded Monday for the police secure parking lot over there on Elm and North 10th Street. You also reviewed the plans for that. So we appreciate your input into those two projects, and they are moving forward. The police facility has been delayed for some time, but now the looks like it's going to move forward. So
Excellent. Any unfinished or other business?
the only thing I would do, and you can decide whether staff is wasting paper or not, but what we have tried to do periodically is just give you in your packets information on things that we think might be of interest to you or what's going on in other communities or places. And there's quite a bit of dialogue going out in the city of Manhattan about safe and affordable housing and community solutions to affordable housing. So we wanted you to be aware of that, and our community relations staff's looking at that and seeing some of those things that we might be able to learn from and apply here. And then I didn't know how well aware some of you were about the Kansas Healthy Food Initiative, but it is a grant program that has an application process, and I'm not sure if Phil Klima took advantage of that when she was here or anything done, but the idea is to work for public-private partnerships that increase access to affordable fresh food. And so I just wanted to make sure that commissioners had that, so you were aware of that if you're interacting with anybody out there in the community. And one, of course, challenges for small communities is maintaining some sort of grocery store. And the city worked hard and with public-private partnerships to save a lot to open in the former Dillon store here in an area that doesn't have much access to grocery store services. So I did not include it in here, but there was one interesting case I saw, and I actually visited over 4th of July, that a family won the lottery, the multi-state lottery, and with their lottery winnings they opened a grocery store and cafe in their hometown, which didn't have one. So I thought that was pretty good use of lottery winnings.
And on that topic, is anyone from the city attending the KSSU workshop on August 13th on Revitalizing Communities in Central Kansas.
I will
It's the
check with our
2019 Resources for Revitalizing Communities in Central Kansas. I am attending, but I think it's specifically probably more geared towards administrators and city
That's
staff.
on the 19th.
The 13th of
13th.
August. Mhm. At the Hilton Garden Inn.
Where at?
Manhattan.
And the name of that program again is what?
KSU TAB, T-A-B.
No, that would be technical assistance for brownfields.
It is.
Focused on brownfields.
Exactly.
We do have a few. They're not been, they've been identified, but not any remediation plans. But we do have some areas around the grain elevators and railroad tracks that would qualify as brownfields under some of those criteria. So, but if these things are of interest to you for reading, we'll try to continue to include some current event stuff in our packets to just keep you up to speed about what's
I think it's all
happening on
very
some of these
relevant
subjects.
information. Yes, I've already passed on some of it.
So, again, I've got it written down so I get it right this time. The August 6th, the first meeting in August, we will not have a meeting. For Mr. Freiberger's benefit, who's your representative on the Board of Zoning Appeals, they have been quiet all summer, but we will have a meeting in August with 3 items we've been
Wow.
saving up. So,
Yeah, and what does the Board of Zoning Appeals do? To me, we would deny some zoning and then they would go to the Board of Appeals. That's what I'm thinking it is, but apparently it's not.
the
Not-
board,
no,
the
not
Board
that.
of Zoning Appeals is designed as a relief valve or safety valve when there is a mismatch between somebody's specific project and the city's regulations. So at the next agenda, one of the applications was filed. Some individuals applied for a building permit to construct a 20 by 30, 600 square foot woodworking workshop in their backyard. And the permit came to me and I denied their building permit because the maximum size of shed that you can have in your backyard is 360 square feet. So on a residential lot, you can have a garage, a detached garage, if you can get access to it, and you can have a shed, and the shed cannot exceed 360 square feet. This individual doesn't have a rear yard garage, and their only desire is to build a large workshop, and the way their house sits, they can't make it a garage because they can't get vehicle access to it. So they are applying to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a zoning variance to allow a workshop that's 600 square feet instead of 360 square feet. So the board hears individualized cases where there's a mismatch between the zoning rules and someone's particular project. And if they think that relief is justified, they can grant it, and if they don't think relief is justified, they can decline to approve it. And there have been...
And the 3 months have been slow, but we hear a lot of cases. A lot of people who want to build large garages. A lot of people.
So,
And tall
yeah,
garages,
and this
really tall
was,
garages.
It was something that the Planning Commission came up with, but before we had kind of a sliding scale. The bigger the lot you had, the bigger the garage you could have. And we used to get endless complaints about, my neighbor built this commercial building, if I wanted to live in a commercial area, so we have a solid cap that says the maximum garage you can build in your yard is 768 square feet. And if you want to go above that, all your neighbors have to be notified, and there's a public hearing in front of the Board of Zoning Appeals. And if all the neighbors say, we've seen the plan, it's an attractive building, it's not out of scale for that lot, we're fine with it, then we can issue a permit for a 900 square foot garage. But it requires notice of the neighbors first and giving them an opportunity to be heard, because it works much better to hear from them before the building goes up instead of after. So
Which we have some of those too.
and so that is probably our biggest case. Also on the agenda, you saw the application from Mr. Bakhta out on Coach Light Lane, requesting commercial instead of agricultural zoning. He is in the floodway, so to do any excavating or filling or grading, he has to get a floodway variance, and those are reviewed by the Board of Zoning Appeals. So those are the types of things when there's potential hardship or there's a mismatch between the regulations that are in place and a specific project. So it's not, they don't hear cases about what a property should be zoned or whether Kansas law prohibits use variances. So nobody can go to the Board of Zoning Appeals and say, I want to have a commercial business in my home, because they can't grant you a use that's not permitted. It just deals with heights, lot coverages, sizes, setbacks, that type of thing.
Anything else? If not, a motion for adjournment? So moved. A second? Second. It's been moved and seconded.
Invite you to go out and enjoy the heat.
We're adjourned.
Thank you very much.